Hey there! First of all, thank you so much for this invitation. It's a pleasure. It's a huge pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me and for giving me some of your time to listen to my story. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how to help your students overcome their fear of shame, how they fear a lot of judgment and finally speak up. I know how it feels because, well, I think I'd rather start with my story so that you understand a little bit of what I've been through my whole life. So I'm going to tell you my story. My name is Marcela Miranda. I've been teaching for 27 plus years, almost 28. This did not happen because I'm old, but because I started when I was 2. No, I'm kidding. I did start very young, at a young age. I was 16. But actually, I started studying from very young age. When I was 7, my mother is also an English teacher, so she immersed me in English since I was very little. So from young age, she wanted me to study English. So I did, and I studied for many years, many years. I think I stopped studying. I finished and graduated from my English course when I was 15, and when I was 16, I started teaching because I had two students that actually they were my friends from school. They weren't my students, they were my friends from school, and they were about to go into that vestibular stuff. They were preparing for school. So they asked me to teach them because I was supposed to be good at English. So I did start teaching them. I didn't know anything about teaching at that time, so my mother kind of helped me out doing that. But this is what really happened to me. When I was 17, I started going for my certification. So I got 2 certifications, one of them an ACP from Michigan University. And in that point, I had the impression that I was ready, that my English was super good, that I was so confident about it. And I was really excited about my first trip to New York when I was 21 years old. So I had been a teacher for about 5+ years. And that's what happened. I saved a lot of money and decided to go to the United States, to New York City, for a TD, for a teacher development course. And so did I. Well, what happens as soon as I got there was this. I'm going to tell you this story because this story is really important for the whole point of what I'm making here today. The thing is, I started, as soon as I arrived in the airport, I went to Miami first. And as soon as I got to Miami, my flight was delayed. And I had someone waiting for me in Orlando. I was going to stay about 20 days, around 20 days at an aunt's house in Orlando. And she was supposed to pick me up at the airport. So my flight was delayed. I decided that I had to call her to tell her, well, don't go to the airport, just wait for me because my flight has been delayed and everything. So my first real interaction in the United States was this. It went like this. I had to make a phone call, and I remember that I had already taught my students about how to make a phone call. I knew all the vocabulary. I was confident. So I got the phone, I got the hook, and I started, well, can I have a collect call to Orlando, please? And as soon as I did that, the woman responded with, and I was like, oh my God. And I hung up immediately because I was so shocked because I couldn't understand a single word she said, a single word. And then I was shocked, because I was supposed to be good. I was supposed to, I had a certification that told me I was good. So I got the phone again. I started self-soothing myself, like, Okay, Marcela, you can do this. You're an English teacher. Come on. Just cool yourself out. You're going to be able to do it. So I did. So I started breathing. Okay, Marcela, breathe. Got the hook again. And then I went, can I have a call to Orlando, please? And the woman went again with, and I couldn't understand a single word again. I hung up again, and then I went, to do what every wise adult does. I started crying. But guys, you have no idea how much I cried. I cried my eyes out. I started crying because everything I could see at that moment was that movie. Do you remember that movie, The Terminal, with Tom Hanks, where he gets stuck in the airport and he goes like 2 months in the airport? That's how I saw myself. I wrote that script, I wrote that movie script because that was all I could see. I could see myself stuck in the airport forever until I had to come back to Brazil. And I was really desperate. Well, I was sobbing and I cried so much, but so much, that people started walking by me and giving me tissues. They were taking tissues out of their bags and giving it out to me. So that was my first very traumatic interaction in the United States. So I stayed this 20 plus days with my aunt, and it went smooth because she knew how to speak English very well. And Miami, Orlando is normally, they speak Spanish too. A lot of people speak Portuguese down there. So I felt quite comfortable, and I felt that I had my aunts to back me up if I had a problem. Okay. And one of the things that was stuck in my mind, for a long time, was that as soon as I was in the airport, when I was about to leave, to get my flight, my mother got my hands. She looked at me in the eye. I was like 21 years old, She got me in the eye and she said, daughter, let me tell you something. If you have any problem, any kind of issue, if you can't deal with something, don't call me. And I was like, oh my God. But she was right, because she said, well, if you call me, you know what's going to happen. I'm going to worry sick and I won't be able to fly in and help you. So you have to, get by yourself. I'm so sorry. I won't be able to help you. And that was it. So my thing was I struggled so much. Well, as soon as I finished these 20 days, I went to New York for my course. And then I went to hamburger place for the first time. I got there very late. I was very hungry. And as soon as I got to this place, I got in line, and I went to the girl. Okay, can I have a cheeseburger, please? And she went like, is that? And I was like, yes, please. And then the second question was, yes. And I was like, yes, please. And I was feeling like, actually, I felt like maybe every gringo feels like that in Brazil. When they come to São Paulo and someone says, nota fiscal paulista, CPF na nota, that's how I felt probably. So I was like shocked because I really couldn't understand. And I was really expecting that they would say something like, would you like to put mayonnaise on your sandwich? I was waiting, and I was really expecting to have fully composed sentences, all those correct auxiliary sentences. And I realized at that moment that I wasn't ready for real life interactions. I wasn't ready for real life English. And that was my big struggle. And even though it's a funny story, even though it's a very funny story nowadays, it wasn't funny at the moment. I was in the United States I was in New York actually for 2 months. And the whole 2 months I was depressed. I cried my eyes out every single day. I packed my bags and I promised myself that I would come back to Brazil every night. So I came into my room, I packed my bags, and I told my roommate, well, now it's enough, enough is enough. I'm going back to Brazil. I was not born for this. And I remembered comparing myself with all the other teachers that were there in that course, and that made me miserable. And for so long, for a long, long time, I hated the city of New York. I hated it because I was so traumatized. I felt ashamed, I felt embarrassed, and I felt like I was a fake. I was phony. I was teaching, but I was not supposed to teach. That was not my place. And I decided to tell you that story because when I started to tell my students this story is when we started to connect. You know what? For a long time, we were taught to be central in our classrooms. We were supposed to know everything, to know it all. And deep down inside, every teacher has struggled at some point in their journey. But for a long time, we've believed that we were not supposed to make mistakes or to not know the words. And I remembered feeling guilty so many times because I didn't know how to say repimboca da parafuseta in English. And I remember that. I remember that feeling of feeling phony, feeling like an imposter. What the hell am I doing here teaching all these people? And everything changed when I started telling my students that I really struggled sometimes in my life too. We started connecting because nobody can connect to perfection. If you're too perfect, if you know it all, if you are that perfect person, people cannot connect with you. Because deep down inside in our brains, we do know we are all imperfect beings. And for connection to really happen, you have to show your students that you also struggle, that you don't know how to say repimboca da parafuseta in English, and it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're an imposter or that you don't know stuff. So when I started telling my students that story, I noticed that there was this buzz, this people were connecting with it. Oh my God, I feel exactly like this. This is how I felt when I went to the United States. And not only other teachers, but other teachers too. They felt like, oh my God, I felt like this whole pressure on my shoulders that I had to be Google for my students, that I had to know all the same words and know all the exact details and rules and everything else. And this feeling of not feeling enough is actually for all of us, because all of us in a certain time in our lives, we have been through struggle and we have felt that we're not enough, that we're imposters and that we're not in the right place, So the very first tip I'm going to give you in this little guidepost that I prepared for you is tell your students your stories of struggle. Tell your students that you're not perfect and tell them that you're not Google. If you don't know something, just, okay, let's Google it together. Let's find out together, because teaching doesn't need to be that old stuff that we learned when we were in school. The fact is that schools did not teach us how to learn. We don't know how to learn. Schools were created with a purpose to prepare us to work in factories. And unfortunately, after all those years, it hasn't changed. We still have classrooms where students have to be quiet to learn. We still have classrooms in which teachers are just the center of attention and they don't have an opportunity for discussion and for creativity to take place. Schools didn't teach us how to deal with fear, anxiety, and much less to connect with other people. Schools didn't teach us that. We felt anxious at school and nobody said, you know what you can do? We didn't know how to do that, and that's real life. We are not factory workers anymore. We're mothers, we're fathers, we're teachers, we're preachers, and we don't know how to deal with these feelings. And we have to talk about them. It's important that that your students know that you also feel anxiety, that you also have had to deal with your own fears. And we have to teach them how to do that too. Schools numbed our creativity because when we were creative, we probably were being very loud and funny. Probably when you were a very little kid and you started screaming in your living room, your mom said, come on, shut up, I have to focus, or I'm watching TV. And at that moment specifically, you were letting your creativity out and play, right? So one of the things that I do for my students a lot is to teach them about this stuff. Not only English, not only vocabulary, but teach them that it's okay for them to feel fear. It's okay for them to feel anxiety. And I'm a human being, so I do feel the same. You know, so students will feel like you're their partner and not specifically someone who's there and knows it all, or understands everything, or knows every single rule. You're going to acquire that with time. And of course, one of my one of the sentences that I learned a long time ago that really helped me in being in my career was that teachers don't know more than students. They know before. That's it. We have more experience. And with that experience, because we have experience, we can teach them. But that doesn't mean you have to know it all. That doesn't mean you have to have all the answers at that time, because sometimes we do forget words in Portuguese too, and it's okay. So I asked my students who are now very free to speak, and I wanted to know from them, I wanted to hear from them, what helped you overcome your fear? What was the part of my methodology that helped you overcome your fear? So they said words like this. Most of them said support. I had support. I had someone that I could count on. I had someone that I could lean on, that I could ask for help if I didn't know something. And if I felt anxious or insecure or anything, I could talk to these people. One of the things that I also teach my students a lot is to choose risk over comfort, because comfort is delicious, you know? Comfort is that Netflix movie with popcorn, your little blanket, and it's so delicious. And out of your comfort zone, it doesn't feel like this. But when students finally start speaking, they have to get out there. They have to understand that it's going to be uncomfortable, you know, and we can't tell our students that it's easy, because learning English, learning the rules, it's really easy. But speaking English, it's not, because it makes us vulnerable. A lot of times we feel stupid, especially in the beginning, and feeling stupid doesn't feel good. And you have to tell your students that it's okay for them to feel this discomfort, that you're there to support them, that if they risk themselves, if they take these risks, they're going to learn so much from it. Because during our journeys, making mistakes is so important, and as important as getting it right all the time. They said something like having a safe environment to practice. Having a safe environment to practice is when you don't judge your students and when you don't stop to correct them all the time. Because first of all, they're not going to learn, because they're going to start entering that zone where they go completely limbic. That means they go into a part of their brain where they are emotional. And when you're emotional, you can't learn. When you're under a lot of pressure, it's impossible to learn. So I always tell my students that when we were little, we learned Portuguese because we were not corrected all the time. And actually, we were accepted for speaking, even when we spoke wrong. You know, even when we didn't get all the sentences correct, we were accepted and we were incentivized to speak. And I always comment on that. You know, sometimes when you go to a friend's house, and they have a little kid in the house, like 2 or 3-ish, they're starting to speak and take their first steps. So they come into the living room, they look at their mothers, and they say, "Hey, Mom, as cruz que não são?" And the mother goes, "Oh, you want some hot chocolate?" And we look at each other like, how does she know that this kid wants hot chocolate? So at this point, this mother wouldn't just look at this kid and say hot chocolate. If you don't say hot chocolate, I'm not going to give it to you. It was comfy, even though that kid was struggling to make sounds, was struggling to compose a sentence, this mother just embraced her and tried from context to understand what she was speaking. So if you do that to your students, you're going to push them forward. So they have to have a safe space. That doesn't mean you're not ever going to correct them. But if you stop them all the time in free practice, they won't be able to start processing their own sentences. And they will correct themselves eventually from listening to you, from listening to everything they have to listen to, from books. They will eventually correct themselves. Don't worry about that. I know that's very difficult to let go, because we always feel that this is our role, to be correcting them all the time. And sometimes this can be a big problem for students, for them to start, making out sentences, creating their own things, making up, They also said that it was very important to them to know that someone believed in them, and I believe my students from scratch. If they start with me today and they don't know anything, I believe they will be able to learn it, And they also said that they got rid of the necessity to always be right. It's very important that you tell your students that they're going to be wrong. Actually, you have to tell them that they're going to be wrong much more often than they're going to be right. And it's okay, because this is the journey, when you're learning, you're going to make mistakes. And if you're not making mistakes, and if you're not allowing yourself to make mistakes, you're really not learning anything, are you? So knowing my saboteurs and dealing with them, because we all have them. It's not only our students. We have our own saboteurs. Our own saboteurs, they come to our mind in that moment when we're feeling vulnerable, and they tell us that we're not good enough. You're not good enough. You don't have enough vocabulary to be teaching. You don't have enough courage, because if you're supposed to speak in public, maybe you wouldn't do. This is what your saboteurs do. And they will do it to your students. So you have to know them. You have to realize you also have these saboteurs working in your mind. Getting rid of competition. This is so important. You have to tell your students that whenever you compete, whenever you enter any arena and you're competing, you are going to lose. It doesn't matter if you're good. It doesn't matter if you know a lot. You're always going to lose. Why is it that? I always say that to my students. You're going to lose because when we're competing, this is what we see. We see people's stage, and we see their lights, and we see them shining, and we see that we think when we perceive them as perfect. So we get a scale and we put that person on a scale in a very, very high position, because in that position, you can't see backstage. But when you enter competition, normally you enter competition with all your flaws and your stage. Backstage and stage together. So this is much heavier and darker. And when you're looking at other people's stage, you can't see their backstage. So it's terrible for you as a teacher and for you as a student to compete with other students. Just teach them how to respect. They have to respect their own path. They have to respect their own journey. It's important that they do. Being open and taking mistakes lightly. Well, you're going to make mistakes. So why not laugh at them? You know, nowadays I talk about this part of my journey when I was in New York for the first time very lightly. It was not light, it was very heavy. I gained a lot of weight in 2 months. I cried a lot, but now I can talk about this trauma that changed my perception about methodology, about how I was going to teach my students, and how I was supposed to be with myself. So I started working on myself a lot, a lot. So one of the things that I use a lot with my students is the VAC test. It's very easy to find it. You can just Google it and you're going to find a lot of them over the internet. And I make my students take this test every time. Every group, every new group I have, I'll ask them to take this test, right? And why do I do that? Because I tell my students, hey, you're not everyone. You know, back in school, when you had to be silent and you had to pay attention to the teacher and you had to write it all, yes, guess what? You're not everyone. So you don't learn like everyone. And when we were at school, we were led to believe that everybody was the same and everybody learned the same way. Lecture, writing down on paper, and being quiet. Actually, if you were quiet, it was a very good thing for the teacher. But you know, we're talking about learning English. We're talking about learning a language. We're talking about learning communication. How is your student going to learn if he's not going to talk? Maybe a good class is not a quiet one, not for teaching languages anyway. You know, it should be loud and noisy and a lot of people talking, and they have their own way, their own pathways. So I ask them to take this test so that they understand what comes easier for them, what they will struggle more with in their path, and what they won't. So I teach them how to do that, and I'm gonna share a little bit of that knowledge with you. So that you can also pay attention to your students and connect with them in a more profound way. If you understand that they are not necessarily visual learners that will sit back and write down and learn everything from it, right? So 75 of your students, actually 75% of people in the world are visual learners. So that means they learn a lot from mind mapping. So if you make them, if you draw on the board, or if you help them construct their own mind maps, they'll learn a lot from it, and they remember it. They learn a lot from Pictionary. So if you have a picture and then the word in English, they will learn a lot. Of course, they will learn a lot with videos. Their brain pays attention to images in general, right? And also, they need eye contact, a lot of eye contact. I know that a lot of people are studying at home, right, or studying from home, and a lot of you teachers are teaching from home, but pay attention to where you're looking at. If I'm a very auditory person, so I'm always looking here down my sides, you know, because this is where you go when you're an auditory speaker or learner. But your visual learner, he will want you to look at them so that they understand that they are being seen and perceived and understood by you. So you look at the camera, you take your eyes and look at them straight so that they know and they feel that you're looking at them. You know, of course, when you're presentially with them, it's going to be easier for them to perceive that, right? Awesome. Very good. 25% of your students are auditory learners. I'm an auditory learner, so that means I can not look at you while you're speaking, and I'm still learning. And sometimes teachers, they don't understand that, because in schools, teachers will say, look at me, pay attention, I'm here. And sometimes your auditory student is paying attention to you. He just doesn't want to look at you right now because he's focused here. He wants to listen to what you have to say. So they need to listen a lot. And you know what happens to me a lot because I'm an auditory learner? I write down, and sometimes I'm not writing down, I'm drawing while you're speaking. And that helps me a lot. I learn much more. So one of the things that I do a lot is audiobooks. I read, actually, I listen to a lot of books, and that helps me much more to understand the contents, to memorize the contents, to really dig deep into my stuff. I need this internal conversations that I have with the authors of the books so that I can learn. They need repetition. They need to repeat in loud voice. Come on, repeat. Yeah, sound. They need to, to detail sounds in their heads. It's important for them. They learn a lot from shadowing. They learn with a rhythm, okay? And one of the things that could help your students, your auditory students, is playing some music. Not music that has lyrics on, but playing some music in the background, like classical music, for example, that will give them some rhythm. And one of the things that probably annoys a lot of teachers, I know it does, and I know, but hey, teachers, they are not doing that to tease you. Some auditory students will do this. And they'll click their pens and they'll go crazy because you think they're not paying attention to you, but they are constructing rhythm. And rhythm is an important part of their learning. So let them be. Let students learn how they learn and feel what's best for them. I had a student, that was really funny, but I had a student that was standing in my class. He was like, he said that to me. Teacher, the thing is, I really need to be standing up. I'm not much of a sitter. This is what he said. In Portuguese, he said something like, I'm insentável, and he was really fidgety. So when he was standing up, he could focus much more. It was easier for us to role play and to have conversations. So I just let him be the way he was, and he learned it anyway. So it doesn't mean because we were educated in regular schools and we were sitting behind a desk and writing down with our notebooks all the time, it doesn't mean that our students also learn like that. So sometimes you have to let them be so that they understand the best way for them to learn. Learning is a process, a little bit of a process of self-knowledge too. You will learn your limitations. You will learn your own stuff, the way you deal with things, how you store information in your mind, right? And pay attention. Auditory learners, they get freaked out by eye contact. So if you give them a lot of eye contact, they will feel like, why are you looking at me? Why are you doing that to me? So don't do that. They will feel very, very uncomfortable. So watch out for that, okay, guys? And 5% of your students are going to be kinesthetic. So that means they need experience. So role playing is very important to them. Very, very important, right? So they need comfort and movement. Have you ever been in a classroom where your student is wearing flip-flops and you told him, hey, don't wear flip-flops? Or they're wearing a cap and you tell them, hey, don't wear that cap because it's disrespectful. Or they're just way too comfy, or they're studying from their home and they're on their PJs, or they're wearing slippers or whatever. Just let them be, because kinesthetic students, they need comfort. They really need comfort. A kinesthetic student cannot learn if they're wearing tight shoes. They just can't, because their focus is in the experience. They need to feel relaxed. And if they need to sit like that, just let them sit like that. It doesn't mean that if students are like this, they're focused, and they need to move. Sometimes they will need to move. They will need different places. If they need to be on a couch, just let them be on a couch. That doesn't mean they're not going to learn. Okay, so just relax with that. So kinesthetic students, they do need a lot of experience, but of course we cannot all the time take them to the streets. So imagination is key. So help them imagine situations, role play with them, some drama lessons. You get that drama teacher out of you and just go there and teach your students with, that thing that they will feel much more involved in their learning with you. And there's another thing, their path when speaking, they speak slower. So if you want to fully connect with them, you have to speak a little bit slower too sometimes, so that you'll be able to follow their rhythm. Because in their mind, their rhythm is slower. That doesn't necessarily mean they're slower learners or that slow means anything, but it doesn't mean that slow is bad, okay? Because we perceive, in regular education, we perceive slow as bad, and it's not. But they need that. And of course, they need touch. If you're in person, you can't touch them on their shoulder, on their hair, on their, but if you're in distance, that's not gonna happen, so you might as well just make them feel comfortable, feel very comfortable in your lesson. Okay, so just let them be with their blankets in front of the computer. That's okay. It's going to be okay. Right? So my gut post to you guys, it's for you teachers. If you want to help your students overcome their own fears, I would totally recommend that you get rid of the necessity of being right and knowing everything. Because the thing is, we cannot teach other people to be something that we're not. If you are not confident, if you don't feel comfortable, they will sense that. And they will not sense that from the way you speak. They will sense that from the way you behave. Many, many years ago, when our first brains came up, 250 million years ago, we were all cavemen, right? And we didn't have language. We communicated by looking at other people, listening to the sounds they made, paying attention to their behavior. And we learned this tool so many years ago. It's still installed in our brain apps. It's still there. So we just need 2 seconds to judge people. We look at them and we know what's good and bad. This is instinctive. It's not something that we pay attention to consciously, but unconsciously we're doing that all the time. So they will notice and they will learn from you a lot from the way you act, from your behaviors. So if you get rid of that yourself, like, I don't know this, let's dive in together. Let's research. Let's Google it together. It's okay. I don't know this word. I don't know how to say, I don't know, coxinha in English. Okay? Whatever. Okay? The second thing is believe all students can learn. This is not easy. I know that it sounds beautiful to say, oh, I really believe all my students are going to be able to learn. But the thing is, I know because I've been there. I've been there and done that. So I know how it feels. And it takes effort to change that. Remember how I said that we judge people from 2 seconds? That happens to us as teachers too. So when our students come into our rooms, we normally, in our minds, we label them. The fast one, the slow one, the dumb one, the never will learn one. We know that. And we do that. But after 20 or 27 years plus teaching, what I learned really was that I could never label my students. Not even in that first moment. Everyone can learn. I have been able to teach blind students. I have been able to teach students with dyslexia. I have been able to teach students who had hearing problems, and they all learned. So sometimes we have that, it's not something conscious, but we judge. Sometimes we look at them and we think, maybe this person doesn't have any talents to learn. But guess what? Learning a language doesn't require any talent. You learned your language one when you didn't even know how to hold saliva in your mind, in your mouth, right? So everyone can really learn. They will have maybe their struggles, different ones. They will have their own way of learning, and they will have to find that out. And you are the one who has to help them find that. So you have to first consciously realize that we all do that. I'm not saying I'm different, okay? But I've taken a decision to consciously not label any of my students. It's not something that we decide to do once. It's something that we practice. We have to practice over and over again. So whenever you feel and you consciously realize and you're aware that you're doing that, take a step back, breathe, and say, no labels, no labels, because we don't know. Sometimes students surprise us so much. You know, something that happens to me many years ago, I had a student with dyslexia, and it was so hard to teach him. And at that point, I was not, I hadn't studied anything about neurolinguistics programming, which is something that I use a lot in my methodology. So I didn't know a lot about this stuff. And I was very inexperienced. And of course, I didn't have maybe as much patience that I have nowadays. I was not experienced enough to deal with that, but I learned how to deal with that. And he was in a group of mine, and I remember that he was the slow student in my mind, to my mind at that time, right? I don't do that anymore, and I practice this a lot. So I just decided one day that I was going to try something new with him because, you know, I just couldn't teach him. He couldn't read. He was very slow. He took a long time to do all the exercises, and sometimes I was like, oh my God, he's never gonna learn. And then one day I decided to call him to an extra class so that I could help him out. And in this class, we only talked in English. We only talked. And I was helping him with his sentences and constructing things. And then I realized that he was, you know, auditory. And he learned really fast from listening. And I was like, Eureka, that was my Eureka moment. That student specifically, he thrived. In 3 months. He was a totally different student. He came from being my slowest student to being my best student in class. And that story really changed my perception on how sometimes labeling students it's not the best solution for us because we stop believing in them. And students, for them to thrive, they have to know that you believe they're going to be able to get there, you know. Well, also, you should get support too as a teacher. You should have other teachers that you can talk to, that you can ask for help if you need. I have lots of groups with other teachers who I ask for help, who I ask for information, how to say that, and we support each other and we teach each other, and sometimes we vent also. You know, I'm having this kind of trouble, so it's important that you feel that you are supported. Students will need that from you, so you have to be okay. You have to be ready and open for them, to listen to them. And I know that's not easy because not only your students will compete, we compete. And this is something that we struggle a lot with. It's not something that we consciously want to do, but sometimes we just go there. And you have to practice not competition. This is my path. This is my time. I'm different from other people. Your superpower is being you. Don't try to be someone else. Someone else's place is taken. Your place is not taken, it's there for you. So don't compete. And when you stop competing, it will be easy for you to teach your students not to compete, because competing is so harmful. Competing always leaves us with the bitter taste of losing. We will always feel like losers if we compete with other people, because we haven't walked their path. We haven't dedicated the same time maybe for our learning. So don't compete yourself. So everything that you want to teach your students, you have to work on yourself first, because they will copy not only what you say, they will copy what you do. They will copy your confidence. They will copy your generosity. They will copy your kindness. They will copy your competing only with yourself. That's the only person you're allowed to compete with. Take your own mistakes lightly, because you're going to make mistakes, teacher. I have made so many. I have made a lot of mistakes through my whole life, and I'm always learning. And I learn a lot from my students until today. Yes, I'm an experienced teacher, but I still learn. I still learn new vocabulary. I still learn a lot for my own methodology, by changing, by being open for feedback. Feedback is an opportunity for us to grow. So whenever you get feedback from your students, you just filter, hey, what can I learn from it? That's the question. What can I learn from this situation? Well, this didn't turn out to be a great class the way I planned it to be. I planned a very great class. It didn't happen. Okay, what can I learn from it? Being open to make mistakes, because you will make them eventually, and take them lightly. Since you're going to make a mistake, just have fun with it. Just I have a story that I always tell my students. The last time I was in the United States, actually one of the last times I was there, I went to a drugstore and I got to the drugstore. I was an experienced speaker already, but we do make mistakes. We make mistakes in Portuguese all the time. So I came to the drugstore and I said, do you have a locker? And actually I was looking for a lock, so the girl looked at me like, you're looking for a locker, like, do you want to get changed in my drugstore? I think that this is what she felt at the moment, and it's funny because I tell my students that story. I was already an experienced teacher, experienced speaker, but still I made that little mistake. But you know what I did? I laughed and I said, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm looking for a lock, not a locker. Okay, maybe she thought I was flirting with her. I don't know, but she was like so shocked. She was like, oh my God, why do you need a locker? Something like that. So take your own mistakes lightly. You're going to make mistakes in your methodology, with your students, in your own life. So learn from it. Just be open, because I always tell my students that we're here in this life, and we're enrolled in a lifetime school. Life is a school. We're always going to have to learn. The good way or the bad way, we're always learning, so we might as well have fun in a way. That's it. So you yourself, choose risk over comfort. If you're not ready for a situation, just go for it. Just prepare and go for it. Because as soon as you start being brave yourself, and being brave, being courageous doesn't mean at all that you don't feel fear. Being brave is action, is taking action despite your fear. That's it. So you have to teach your students that it's okay for them to feel fear. It's okay for them to fear what people think of them. But still, they have to do it. They have to take action. Power is to do. Doing things will make you learn, not knowing things. There's a big difference between knowing and doing things that you know. When you leave, as soon as you finish school, driving school, you get your license, but you're not a driver. You become a driver by sitting behind the wheel. So you sit behind the wheel and then you make all those mistakes and your car dies and a lot of people honk at you and they call you Dona Maria and they say, go to the kitchen and stuff like that. And then you eventually learn. So you have to go there and sit. So if you learn, you as a teacher, as a human being, that you have to take risks sometimes and choose risk over comfort. Sometimes risking something you never tried in class, but this time you will. I remember when I started studying neurolinguistics programming, and I really, really wanted to try out a meditation with my students in class. I wanted to try that out. And for a long time, I was scared that I was going to innovate too much, that I was going to, I don't know, to be too mystical for my students. And then I realized that I had to be myself. And you know what? I help a lot of my students with meditation in class and they love it. They really, really love it because it helps them grow. So when I started taking more risks and being more myself and being more authentic and speaking my truth to my students, it was easier. They were also learning to choose risk. And if I can give you this one last piece of advice is never stop learning. You know, a lot of people come to me and they say, oh, I want to change my life. My life sucks right now. I don't feel that, you know, things are changing. And I always ask my students back, okay, so how many courses have you taken this year? How many books have you read? If you're not learning, your life's not going to change. Things are not going to change. You are going to change. And if you're constantly learning, you'll always have something to talk about. You'll always have something to innovate in your class. You'll always have something to bring to the table when you're with your students. So if you really want to be a good teacher to your students, never stop learning yourself. The more you learn about anything, not only about English, it's not only about English, it's learning stuff that you can bring, that you can discuss with your students. And I know sometimes it's difficult because we feel like we've been, we've been like this for a long, long time. We've been teaching for such a long time. And sometimes we don't feel the need. But the more we work on ourselves, the better we get, the better person we get, And one of the things that you could also teach your students is that people will always judge them, no matter what, You just have to understand that it takes courage to get yourself out there and let people think and let people speak. If you're doing your thing, that's the most important. People with a fixed mindset just believe that success is the only thing on the table. But if you have a growth mindset, you will value your efforts and you will value your students' efforts. So doing is more important than getting it right. Doing is more important than getting the gold medal. It's not about getting on the top of the Everest. It's about the path that you're taking because all the lessons are on the journey. They are not there. And tell your students that fluency and speaking is not a point in their journey. It's not. There will not be a day when your students are going to say, oh, you know what? I became fluent on the 22nd of July, 1987. That's not true. Acquiring fluency is a collection of milestones that you're going to have. At first, I was not able to listen to people, to native speakers, but now I am. At first, I couldn't understand anything on a book, and now I can read books in English. You know? So achieving these milestones and celebrating them with your students, you know, you are going to learn how to value that, and they are going to learn that from you too. They are going to learn, oh my God, I have a little thing here. And they are going to learn to value their own efforts, because the effort is more important than anything else, than just getting everything right all the time. So guys, thank you so, so much for your time, for all the comments, for everything. And SBS, thanks for this invitation. It was amazing to share a little bit of my story with you. I love that you're using my hashtag Bora Destravar, because this is exactly my, this is exactly my specialty. You know, I help my students feel unlocked, especially teaching them not only English and more vocabulary, but teaching them how to go to the arena and really practice, no matter what other people think, and just taking responsibility for their efforts and consistency. So thank you so much for being here. If you want to find me on Instagram, my at is @tia do inglês, arrobinha tia do inglês. Muito obrigada pelo convite, Rafinha, um beijão para você. Obrigada por alguns dos meus alunos que estavam aqui hoje também assistindo, aproveitando para praticar, e muito obrigada, professores, principalmente pela permissão. O aprender, ele vem de um acordo, né, aonde você permite o aprendizado e o professor ensina. Então, muito, muito obrigada. Thank you so much.